Hello and welcome to another podcast episode from Fred Davis. Fred is a non-dual teacher, or unteacher would be more truthful. This episode is a clip from Satsang on the 24th of September 23, and we hope you enjoy it.
It's impossible for the mind, even good big minds like your mind, it's impossible to grasp this. It can't, the finite cannot grasp the infinite. It just simply cannot happen. And you know math much better than I do, but work with that. And I don't think you'll see any way that it happens. What we do is we live in our world, and which is not if I'm living in Fred's world, then it's not going to be the same thing as Jim's world. But for awakeness, there's just one. There's just one thing going on here. There's no separation. And there's no Fred or Jim or Fred's story and Jim's story and all of that. I mean, there can be a knowledge of it, a seeing of it, but it won't be a believing of it. Because that's what really hurts, is that we tend to believe these projections. And, I found out something when I got sober, which really shocked me. I thought I had always been able to read people really well. And when I got sober, I just noticed I read people wrong all day long. I mean, I had no idea what they were thinking or what they were going to do or anything at all. And that was just sort of a comfort to me, whatever that was, to believe that, oh, I see what's going to happen. There's a pattern here. I can spot patterns. I'm a pattern spotting animal. That's one of my chief attributes. Except for the fact that there really is, there's a pattern, but it's not a promised pattern. It's not a definite, because we're here, we're going to go there the next minute. You know, you're climbing up the stairs, and at some point, your next step is the top of the stairway, but you're not ready for it. You know, you're just stepping into the next step, and then you recognize, oh, I'm there. It's the projection that, God, I don't know if I'm going to make it up these steps or not. You know, I mean, I'm so tired, and these are so steep, and we just eat away at ourselves like that all the time. I'm going to get caught on these steps, and I really shouldn't be here. I know, I don't know where I should be, but I'm a pretender, and everybody knows I'm a pretender, and blah, 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 blah. And this is where we live, is in this chatter, this mental chatter. And when I say that's where we live, there's really no one there. It's just chatter. And we were, again, false projection. We project that there's someone in the middle of that chatter, and that someone is actually chattering outward, but they're not. There's no inside, there's no outside. There's just this chatter. And when we're following chatter and we're trying to make sense out of it, we're going to make mistakes all the time, and we're going to suffer for them. If I think that you should fill in the blank and you don't, and you didn't even know that was a possibility, that's just me just reading it in. Then there's going to be constant disappointment, and that's what we live with. Is there's constant disappointment with this, because yeah, this may be it, but it's just not enough. And it's not enough for who? The man in the raft. The man in the raft is never going to be enough, because if that boat had picked you up, they would have treated you poorly. And you would have noticed the food on this ship is no good. How did I get off this shit? So it's just a constant quarrel. We're in a constant quarrel with what is. And the simple recognition of that is very powerful. just like you've just noticed. Wow, nothing's as I thought. And that's the critical place that we have to hit before we can recognize things as they really are on a consistent basis. I mean, we know you've had spiritual experiences and this and that and the other, but on a we're into a, I'm just going to say a condition. It's not a good word, but I don't know a good word. But whatever this is, it's not a state. So we are trying to get to some state where things are a certain way. And enlightenment is not a state. And enlightenment really is the absence of a state, because we're always in a state. We're in a state of hypnosis from the time we're 2 years old on, just roughly, maybe 18 months. But certainly from 2 years on, we're just in hypnosis. We're under, it's divine hypnosis. And the divine hypnosis says that this is the center and you are my bit players. This is the movie, you are the, and you are just the support staff. And Betsy had a dream last night. Most bizarre thing I ever heard. But it's still, she was still in it. She was still the featured character. And that's what it will do, is that it will make us the featured character in every scene. And we're just not the featured character in many scenes at all, if any. Then if we are the featured character, that's just a character. It's not true. So the belief in the character is where it really starts, because then the character has experiences. Awakeness is experiencing itself, ing, add ing to everything. And awakeness is lifing and talking and listening and driving and sweeping. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect all these dots so that we can make a consistent story, so that I can have a purpose in my life and I can have a reason for everything. But I'm not saying there's not a reason for everything, but I can't find it. I mean, I can sometimes see that, okay, it rained, thank goodness we needed it, but it didn't rain because we needed it. It just rained because it was time to rain. And me sitting out there, please God, rain in my yard. And my neighbors across the street going, please God, no more rain. I just can't take it anymore. And what's God to do? It can't, so what happens is what happens. It's not directed. And what we have to learn to do is just to move with this thing piecemeal. In other words, there is a big wide picture here, but we can't grasp it because it's not that we're a limited being. We're not. We are awakeness itself, and we're unlimited. But the viewpoint coming through one of these units is very limited. And that will be as wide as awakeness can see until it is genuinely awake to what is. And then it can begin to see, wow, God, that's the most distorted thing I could ever imagine, which is of a Fred-centric world. And because, see, the thing is it may be a Fred-centric world, but you don't know that. You're pretty sure it's a Jim-centric world. And so the willingness to just go with the next thing, with the next step. In AA, they used to always talk about the next right step, and I never understood that. I mean, I just took the next step. That's all I could do. I didn't have choices to differentiate. Well, this is right, this is wrong, this is okay. The next step is taken, would be a better way to put it. The next step is taken, but it's not taken by Jim or Fred. It's just part of what's happening. And whatever situation that is, I can resist it. I don't change the situation whatsoever. but I change the unit's experience, I will suffer. Whereas if I can see, oh, I see. So there's not supposed to be any electricity today. And I was thinking that there was supposed to be. And so I had it all wrong. And the willingness to go after our viewpoint instead of when I say our viewpoint, from the neutral viewpoint, from awakeness's viewpoint, which awakeness has no viewpoint, it's just neutral. So it's not like this is good and that's bad. But resisting what is you could have an equal sign there, suffering. Acceptance of what is, it may not make everything terrific. And you may not be able to actually even do it because we don't know who there is over there that could possibly accept this. There's no separate thing over there, but it will look like it and it will feel like it. And so what we do is we have to develop the willingness to be moved as the wind blows. Wind is blowing this way. This must be the way we're supposed to go. Now see it's moving back this way. It was supposed to go that way because it did, but now it's going this way. It means that this way is right. And just not being resistant to the forces of change. You've never actually changed. It's the circumstances here. The dream is the content of the dream is always changing. But the dreamer never changes. It makes it sound like there's somebody or some entity that's dreaming. And I frankly, and when we get to that point, I don't even know what I mean because I can't find any dreamer or entity. But that's what I can really report. In all honesty, I can't really report there isn't one. I could just tell you that there isn't one as far as this unit can tell. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but it's one viewpoint of what is very, very unlikely to ever come into full agreement. It's not actually about Jim's acceptance and Jim's approval. It's recognition that there's apparently one thing going on here, and that really, if we break it down, if we can get to the end of the day, what we'll find out that the one thing that's going on here is love. And it takes all sorts of twisted forms. And we will not understand it, because you can't look at Ukraine and see the love that is Putin's motivation. And it's not. But it's not about, there's no Vladimir Putin either. There's just a viewpoint there. It's twisted. But it's just a viewpoint. There's no Vladimir Putin. There's no one for me to resent or reject or to welcome. It's just recognizing that this is how things are. And, the funny thing is that God doesn't owe me an explanation. And I always thought that she did, right? That she would come down and tell me, so this is why I'm doing this. And then I could connect all the dots and I could give my approval, or I could say, nah, let's not do that. And clearly that's not the way of the world. So it's awakeness that will accept that it itself is unconditional love. And that what this unconditional love is in love with is the only thing there is, which is itself, which is love. Love loves love. And we want to make sense out of that, but there's no making sense out of this. I've never made any sense out of this. And it's a big disappointment if you've come here for, to get the answer guy, tell me the secret of the universe. And what I have to do is confess to you that I know even less here than I did when I got here 40 years ago. But what's left that I do know, I'm trying to dump that if I can. Because the less I know, the better off I am. Because anything that I know from a position. And the real position is just notice that we have never been asked to change. We have always ask the world to change, but we've never really been asked to change. And, we never got the handwriting on the wall. And change happens, but it doesn't happen to anybody, and it doesn't happen because of anybody. It just, change happens. And that's the content of the dream. And I'm so concerned about the content of the dream that I just don't spend any time looking for who's the dreamer here, or is there a dreamer? Because you drop out the bottom of either one of those, and suddenly it's that you find out that there is no way that the world is supposed to be. Everybody in this room is smart. It's a matter of degree. There's somebody who's got the highest IQ or whatever, and someone who's the most developed in life overall, whatever. But there's, in this, there's just equanimity. And with that equanimity, if we are coming from the place of equanimity, what will arise are observations. And it won't be opinions, it'll be observations. And my opinion is what I always thought was important. Like, oh, that shouldn't be. Well, let's see, that pits you against the entire universe. Do you think you're going to win that? And early on in my sobriety, I can remember, which is now 20-something years ago, I can remember sitting in a courtyard, and I was devastated because I had just done some really stupid stuff and found myself out of town with no car and no money, all because of my pride. And but I looked up at the sky, and there was a storm coming in. But when I looked up at the sky, I just saw billions and billions of insects, and they were all moving in one direction, like this, across the face of the sun. They were all moving in the same direction. And in this vision over here, there was one insect that was pushing that way. And I saw immediately that that was me, that I had been pushing against what is all my life. And it's kind of like what you said, is that I used to think, I could read people. I couldn't read people. I have no idea what anybody else is thinking unless I ask them. And then I just have to go by what they tell me. I can't know if what they're telling me is the truth or not. Be willing to just watch which way the wind is blowing and be willing to move in that direction at that time. At that time. Yeah. And people will tell me, well, I mean, where's oneness, or where's God, or something? And well, this is it. And it's like, oh, no. Yeah. Because I've already come up with the way it's going to be when I wake up. And it's going to be really different from this. It's going to be, every moment it's going to be electric, or every moment it's going to be seductive or something. Mm-hmm. And really, there's only the one moment. The content, if you will, not that it's really a moment, but there's only the now, and the content of this now is always changing. But the now that gives it apparent life, and actually that takes the apparent life away, all of that's in our heads. It's not, because we give motivation to everything, and there's no why, and there's no because of. It feels like it. It looks like it. It looks like that. It looks like I picked up this bag to show it to you, but the truth is the bag was picked up. There's no me here to show it to someone else over there, but that's the story. And then beyond that, if I want to, I can go into an elaborate story, which is, and this bag is holding the most important thing, which right now would be true, which is space. But I just do this kind of stuff really to torture myself.
Yeah.
That's what I end up doing. Whether that, I don't think that's there is no motivation. I mean, there appears to be, but everything happens the way that it must. There's no right way for things to be, and there's no wrong way for things to be. There's no right way to do something. There's no wrong way to do it. There are ways that are certainly more efficient, more effective, more loving, more enlightened or less enlightened, more or less skillful. But everything is happening in the only way that it can. So when I set down my feet and say, this is wrong, God Almighty, I'm talking about the entire universe, because there's no separate thing that is connected to something else. It feels connected. And when we start to wake up, it looks connected. But you can't connect or disconnect to the one thing going on, which is the bastard child of the none thing going on. Because there's not really anything happening here. But we will experience it, and we don't want to ignore it, because this is our experience. Why would we want to ignore experience? This is what it's all about. This is what so-called duality is all about, is experiencing. Awakeness is experiencing itself objectively, and it experiences itself as a Fred, experiences itself as Alexander, and it experiences itself as trees and bees and sun and fun, and that's what it's all about. Not that, I mean, experiencing is not necessary, but someone once wrote a book, is love, or talked about writing a book. It was O. Henry, who was a comic writer and satirical in the early 20th century, and I'm a little past that. And his question to the world was, is making love necessary? And who cares, right? And but seekers care. It's all connected. So where's this? What is this thing's job? And just be willing to go with what's showing up, because what's showing up will probably be different than your idea of what's showing up. Yes, it is freedom.
Yeah,
it's the freedom. I don't have to do non-duality right. No, what we want to do is we want to get rid of what we already found out, because it wasn't true. It's distorted, and and we will live by way of the distortions, because they're our distortions, and that makes it our dream, and everything becomes personal, and I'm wounded left and right. This thing is so simple, isn't it? The void is absent of experience, and we're all trying to figure out, what does that feel like? What does that look like? Well, it's absent of experience. So it doesn't look like or feel like or sound like anything. It's the absence of experience. Therefore, this is the rich, just the rich treasure that it's a gift from you to you, and you can make a nightmare out of it. That's your prerogative. And but it's not necessary to do that. I kind of thought it was. I thought it was necessary for me to overcome all of the obstacles in my way. But see, in the absence of a mind, there's no obstacle. And there's no my here. There's the sense of a my. There's a sense of a thing, which we could call Fred or whatever. It's not true, and I'm not allowing my hunches, to when I was in the hospital, and the doctor would say, "What do you think about so and so?" And I'd say, "Well, I don't know. Let me think about it. I mean, all you've got is a medical degree, and I have a hunch." Yeah, and my hunches override everything, but not they did used to, but they don't anymore. The relative experiencing this morning, I don't even remember what, but there was something where attention was caught looking at, I don't know, a thought or an emotion or something that rose up here. I think it was a thought. And then there was the immediate recognition that it's not your thought. That's somebody's, that's just something that's happening. I don't actually have to take a position on it. Mm-hmm. I don't have to say, oh, a good thought or a bad thought. I can just allow that thought to come and go, and I can decide to mix up with it, and that may or may not happen because I can't really make those kinds of decisions. Mm-hmm. But I think just if we, you're talking about the lostness of it, and there's a weed that grows in the yard, develops a yellow flower. I can't think of it, and it has these little puff balls that it. Mm-hmm. And a big thing I remember about it was that years ago I found out that the leaves were edible. But let me just tell you something. If you run across that, you better be hungry. Because I was not hungry enough and I couldn't eat them. Yeah. But I was going to live off the land of my front yard, whatever. Nature boy. And that fluff ball, it's not anchored anywhere. Mm-hmm. And but when I see them, I don't think, oh, that poor aimless bastard. It's just free. It's just free. It's not. Yeah. And that's what we're really going for, is the recognition that we're already free. Yeah. We don't need to reach freedom. We just need to recognize that. As long as there is a sense of an I, there will always be a struggle. And that's the nature of the belief in an I. Is that because I is always the separate one, and I'm pretending like I'm the one that's always right, but I'm suspecting I might be the one that's always wrong.
Oh yeah,
it sort of feels like that, and I don't look for an I. Whatever is talking no longer looks for an I. It's exhausted. Any curiosity or anything about that is at a much lower level than the fatigue and frustration experienced from chasing that. It's because it's another variation of trying to understand this.
Yes.
And the freedom from this can only come after there's the recognition that there is no understanding it, because there's no one there to put it all together, and you don't have to put it all together. It's already together, hence the name oneness.
Simple.
Yeah, it's too simple. It's just too simple. And truly, that's it. Is that this is the only place that I can think of where I'm sure there must be some other places, but the only place I can think of where intelligence is not necessarily a boon.
Yeah.
Right? Because
we're
looking for the intelligent, understandable, logical heart of this. And There ain't one that I have ever, that's ever been discovered here. I shall put it in the vaguer terms. So it's letting go of the need to understand, because that's just egoic.
Yeah.
How does this all work? Did you want to, that goes back to the story where, well, there's a guy that's been shot by a stranger, and a stranger shoots another guy with an arrow, and it's a poison arrow, and somebody comes up to pull the arrow out, and the guy but it's shot with an arrow, and somebody comes up to pull the arrow out and save his life, and he goes, wait just a minute. Before you pull that arrow out, I'd like to know who it was that shot it. Right? And they find out who, and it comes back and say, well, it was Bob. And well, now I'd like to know why Bob did it.
Yeah.
And how Bob did it. And what was Bob thinking when Bob did that? And because he just dies from the poison, right? Because he was more interested in satisfying his curiosity than he was of living freely, period, but freely, away from poison. And that's what we do.
Yeah.
We just keep asking our questions so that we can understand non-duality, not recognizing that the whole time that we're doing that, non-duality itself is asking non-duality itself, how do you think this works, bud? It's just not, that's not what we come to see. It's so giving up understanding, giving up on putting this all together, giving up on learning what this is all about so that I can then share it in my new book. Because best you can do is point. And most of the pointing is going to be, even if it's put very clearly, it will be misunderstood, but only by 180 degrees. It will be exactly the opposite of what the mind has come up with. The quicker that we abandon all these things, abandon all hope, ye who enter here, right? And just abandon all abandoners.
Yeah.
Right. And just
awesome.
let this rain. Thank you. Yeah. So to the newcomers, let me just tell you that almost everybody in this room is awake, and we welcome you whether you are or not. It's not a requirement. It's just what happens if you hang around here for a while. And I just noticed that seems to be the pattern. And because the living method, which you may have heard about, but the living method is it's really not a method. It's a structure in the sense that first there is what we do here is, rather than try to train you and get you to practice and all this stuff, so that one day, someday down the road, when we're out of sight, you're going to come to the big awakening that you've heard about and you deserve. And that's just not true. So what we do is we wake you up first, which takes the mystery out of a lot of things. And and the beauty of it is that it shuts so many questions down. It's just the stop for so many questions. And then there is the clearing up of what's been seen. There's which by that doesn't mean there's somebody here to achieve that. It means that awakeness through this lump of conditioning is coming to see its own truth more and more clearly, which means simply that there's less and less experience of Fredness. So it's not like Fred will ever get a handle on this. there's no Fred. And getting a handle on that is what we want to, if we could get a handle on that, that's what we would want to do. There is something that happens here that is below all the language that we're so hotly trying to understand. And it's simply, and it's just resonation. As awakeness is resonating with itself in this room, and it's either doing it consciously or unconsciously, or some sort of mixture. But it's not necessary for us to learn anything. We already know truth. We are truth. But in order for us to experience that truth, we had to unlearn much of what we already think we know. And that's difficult because ego doesn't want to give up its possessions. It's what makes it different. It's what makes the ego different, makes the ego the star. The ego has a really good idea about blah, 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 blah. No. So it's just the recognition, oh, I'm looking for something. And it's the looking that counts. That looking is not being done by anybody. It's just a process that's happening. There's not my looking, and it's not my looking because of you or before you or any of that. It's just looking. Who's the looker? You'll have to get a better teacher than this one if you want to understand that. But I'm going to recommend that you don't come to understand that.
Yeah.
Be lost. Be just like I am. Be lost. Don't go for the answers, the secrets of the universe. That's always going to be egoic. Just recognize what we thought to be secrets as they make themselves obvious as we go along. Yeah. In the absence of an I, it seemed to be just happening. So there's really, when we talk about motivations, we're always talking about personal motivations and personal rewards and personal this. There's no personal. There's just this, and it's happening as it is. And it's not the thing that's just outside of this unit. It's the thing in which this unit appears. There is, what there is there, there's void, and then there are appearances within void. But I'll go right back to saying, how much do appearances weigh?
Not much.
Yeah, no, right. It's just thought.
Hmm.
There's this, and there's and this is actually all there is. But thought is trying to make this more, or bigger, better, more. That's what these units want, and they want to be. These units want to be satisfied, but because it's a unit, it can't be, right? As long as it's thought that it's a unit, there can be no satisfaction for that unit. It just can't. There's no satisfaction here for individuals. It can't happen. The satisfaction is the recognition that there are no individuals and there are no alternatives or comparisons to this. There's just this, and it's not just this plus what you think about it. There's no you there. There's a sense of you, there's a development of you, there's a feeling of a center, but that's just feelings and thoughts, right? We come to rely on thought, we're in serious trouble. That's one of the reasons we come here. Trying to get to where we're not so dependent upon thought. It just we can trust what's happening now, and there's no one there that can trust it. It's just trust. There's just trust. There's peace here with this, but no, there are no buts. Get your butts out of here, right? It's what we have to do is we have to give up our little, really, when we look at it, once awakening has occurred, and acceptance of that awakening has also occurred, which is even more important than the awakening. Once acceptance of the awakening has occurred, then it's just seen that the questions any questions that remain is just egoic curiosity. Is something. It's just that question is just to keep the character alive, right? And it's not really. There is no character, so you can't keep it alive. But you give it the semblance of life because it's asking questions. It's still quarreling with God. And as long as there's a quarrel, there's got to be somebody there doing it. And you can't quarrel by yourself unless you think yourself to be two. Then you can. But ultimately, there's no explanation for anything, because that would be the idea that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. The idea that there is progress for somebody or regression for somebody. And what it amounts to is there's belief in thought until there isn't. And once we come to, doesn't mean that thoughts stop. It just means that I stop putting great, stock by them. I don't believe what comes into this head. When I say I, what do I mean? Well, I mean awakeness. Is that I, awakeness, don't need to believe what this unit's processing. It's just a relative thing. It's just occurring within a certain made up, a certain sense of universe. And I don't care whether the Keithness understands anything. I can hear myself. I can always hear myself. I can spot myself usually, and I can always hear myself. And what I notice is that over there I'm wearing a blue shirt, over here I'm wearing a black shirt, and that's about the only differences. Yeah. That's some more of that. That's the way here. What I notice is that this seems to be powerful enough that via Zoom, I have been through I awakeness through this unit have been waking up people for 11 years on the internet, and that probably a couple of thousand people came to see that's enough. And for a few people, no teaching is going to wake everybody up. Most teachings don't wake anybody up. They just talk about we're gonna, and you will, and all this and that. This teaching actually actively goes, and you have to be interested. It's not something that I can do to people. It's just something I can do with people if people are motivated enough. And because you don't get to take this with you. I mean, you don't get, as what Jim was talking about, you don't get to take all your beliefs and everything with you and then find out where all of that fits in with this new thing over here. The new thing is the old thing. It's the only thing. So the idea of I should have a closer thing, it comes back to the idea of separation. I can't be closer to myself than I am right now. Right. And I'm talking to myself. I'm not, right? I'm just not talking to an individual.
Right.
I can't find any individuals. I can notice that there are apparent individuals, and I can notice that I can, hook, line, and sinker from time to time.
Right.
But there's no way to get clearer than clear. It may take a little less effort if you're with me personally. I've woken up a lot of people face to face. I used to do it, but I don't do it anymore. I haven't done it in years and years because it just was unnecessary. And it's such an inefficient use of my time. I got to, go on the road and do what all the other teachers do. And I just sit here and everybody, the people that I talk to come to me. And it's so much better because there's a recognition of something more is needed or you would never come here. So to come here and then suggest that there isn't anything more needed is ridiculous. So there's a recognition there.
Right.
And so that is the telling tale right there, is when you're able to recognize that whatever it is that I'm doing is just not enough. And it's not like I got to have more, bigger, better, more. It's not that kind of pull. It's not even because it's not an individual pull. It's awakeness pulling itself. And awakeness, it can't be, you wouldn't be in this room, I don't think. I can't be sure of anything, but I don't think you'd be in this room if awakeness did not want to know itself through that unit. Because you got to go through some trouble usually to end up in this room. You may have had to go through 20 years of seeking or 30 or 40 years of seeking or whatever. And I went through 24 years before I wound up here.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And the truth is, I remember when I was resentful towards this notion, but it really is true, is that most people do not want to wake up. Most people want to talk about waking up. Most people want to be seekers that are close. How close are you? Very close, very close. When do you think you'll wake up? Very soon. Nobody ever woke up soon.
Yeah.
It's here or nowhere, now or never. So the recognition that I can't use the future and a story of future to put off acknowledging the truth, that's all we have to do. It's just awakeness is in denial.
Yeah.
Through that unit, and for it to just open to the truth and then not fight what's been seen. Because ego is perfectly happy to just wipe away. It's done it with many people. Is that I can remember when the phenomena first hit, and it doesn't really hit much anymore because I don't wake people up the same way I used to. And this has more staying power as a rule. And I don't think, it seems to me that if you don't go and you don't follow it up rigorously and all that you will just fall back into the dream. That's because that's the way it would have been with me. And I think that most people who don't follow up on the awakening will fall out of it. But I can tell you that I had a GoFundMe recently, and I got notes from people from years ago. You changed my life, and this and that and the other. And they had just come to a skillful means. They had woken up and they had gone on and lived their life, and they were still consciously living as awakeness. So there's no pegging it. But as a teacher, what I want to do is I want to present that which wakes up if you will, it wakes up is a misnomer, but just for the sake of languaging, that it wakes up most people most of the time, most people most of the time. And it turns out that and I know that I've heard that there are that methods don't work. Methods don't work. But I hear that from people who are actively engaged in a method. And it may be called Buddhism or Christianity or whatever. Or, it might be called sun worship, or I don't know what it is, but it's, methods don't work is crazy. That's the only thing that works. If there's not a concerted, well, there's always those who wake up just by magic. I mean, is what it seems like. They just wake up spontaneously. I appeared to wake up spontaneously, but I noticed it was only after 24 years of trying.
Yeah.
Looked like there was nothing to it. And
Yeah.
so the willingness to stop believing, not really stop putting all this stock in my thoughts, that these are, number one, we can quit claiming they're ours because they're not. They're just thoughts. And there's no one home here. It looks like there is, sounds like there is, everybody thinks there is, but there's not. There's no one home here. This is a walking cadaver through which awakeness is speaking. Take away the sense of being, and this thing will collapse. Right? It's not a self-supporting system, given that there's no self. But it can be about fear. That's what I was saying. I said it's a good way to avoid the truth.
Yeah.
And there were times when I was like that too. And you can go into meditation and you can fall asleep just because you're a human being and you've got your eyes closed. And the older I get, the easier it is to fall asleep wherever I am. And but usually I think most often for people who are really on the path and then they come to a satsang like this and they go to sleep, I just think that's pure avoidance. And it's avoidance out of fear, because the truth is that we don't want to tell ourselves the truth. The truth is very, very simple, but we don't want anything to do with it. What we want is, we want to wake up Donna and Fred.
Mm-hmm.
And then Donna and Fred will really be something. You think there's something now. Wait until they're enlightened, and then you'll see a cool Fred and Donna. And I'm not throwing stones at anybody. I went through that exact thing myself.
Mm-hmm.
I actually I woke up, and I'm just kind of gonna say this time, I'll have been many awakenings, little awakenings since. But the last big kahuna was in 2006. But prior to that, I woke up in 2002 in Oregon. But the problem was the ego immediately took that over.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was recognized, oh, I did it.
Mm-hmm.
I got it, says Fred. God, this makes me special, doesn't it? And it's gone. It's gone just that quick. I want to grab hold of this thing. How do I stay here? How do I keep this? And it's, well, how do you fall out of yourself? You don't, but you can think you do.
Right.
And going cloudy is simply the belief in thought. It's the belief in Adana again. In the absence of a belief in Adana, and I recognize that there's Dana-ness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of patterns there. I can see some of the patterns. I can hear some of the patterns. I can imagine some of the patterns. And all of that put together, that might be what we call Dana-ness. But it's like a hurricane. There's in the middle of a hurricane, there's just an absence of hurricane, which is the eye of the hurricane. There's no weather there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same thing with this, is that it looks like Donna's awakening, but that's only if we first posit and believe that there really is a Donna, and there's not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that, but the acceptance of that is brutal.
Mm-hmm.
We've I don't think you'd mind me mentioning it, because you've been a good sport. Possible awakeness woke up through that body and spoke to us. And when sometime after the satsang was over, and it was clear, and I would say, do you see what I was telling you about this? Yeah, I get it. I'm sorry, I appreciate it. And all of this, and then boom, all that disappeared. And I've seen it happen many times before. it's enlightenment is about right now. We always thought, or I always thought, and I'm pretty sure I was always taught, that it was an event that would happen to somebody, after which there would be no more confusion, no more seeking, no more believing thought, no more da-da-da. But that's assuming there's a Fred here who finally got it. And there isn't a Fred here. There are patterns, and these patterns spot themselves all along. And there was continued seeking after truth was seen here. And you hear that the truth will set you free. Well, not in my experience. Is it sets you up to be free? That is true. But it's not like you go from a dull state to an estate like Ramana Maharshi or something, overnight. Well, that was a good buzz. And humility is required, and this unit's never been any good at that, so it can't brag on it. Somehow, through desperation, through pain, there came to be enough humility to tell myself the truth, because there's no one else to tell me. I could tell myself the truth, and I could just take this down. Just that simple. How do I do that? You don't do it. How do you run out of a breath after you run across a field? You don't do that. It's just, there's just exhaustion and boom. And that's the way that enlightenment most often is that it comes at an exhaustion point when there's really, for me, it was the recognition that this unit could not live, because the upcoming story that I was pretty sure I could predict, and I knew what it was going to look like, and it was going to be terrible, and that was just not doable by me. It was not acceptable as a future. And so, but the suicide was the answer, except for the fact I was married to Betsy, and by that time I was head over heels in love. So I loved her more than I hated life. So I just, rather than, because she'd already had somebody she'd already had a business partner shoot himself the year before. I didn't have the right it was clear to me that I didn't have the right to do that to her, because I wouldn't be doing it to her, but she would read it as that. Everybody around me that's close is killing themselves. What does that say about me? So I could not live, but I could not die. That's the reason when I asked Keith, when you stop asking questions, what happens?
Right.
And there's just, and that's the waking up point, is where there's just the baggage is dropped, the doors fling themselves open, and awakeness claims itself. The unit is the way it's spoken of, is the unit claims its birthright, but that's not the way the experience goes. It's awakeness is the unborn, so it has no birthrights, but it can be through languaging, it can be construed as such, usually fairly harmlessly. But the odds are, I mean, you just wouldn't be here if there wasn't a sincere desire to wake up.